You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? That was me, sitting on my couch on a quiet Friday night, chopsticks halfway to my mouth, frozen in place as my boyfriend's iPad lit up across the room. Rick had left that morning for a weekend conference in Denver. Same old routine, kiss on the forehead, rushed goodbye, suitcase wheels clicking down the hallway. He even texted me from the airport, security lines insane. Love you. See you Sunday. So when the iPad buzzed, I didn't think much of it at first. He hardly used the thing anymore. It was an older model, mostly for watching YouTube or reading. I glanced at the screen, expecting a junk email or maybe a calendar reminder. But no. The preview read, "Congratulations. Your $9,800 personal loan with LendingTrack has been approved." I blinked. Then blinked again. What? At first, I thought it had to be a scam. One of those phishing emails that sneak into your inbox. But something about it looked legit. So, against my better judgment, and out of sheer curiosity, I picked up the iPad and tapped it open. And just like that, my world shifted. It wasn't a scam. The email was real. The loan was real. Issued 3 days ago. Fast approval. No credit check. High interest terms. The whole package. And the borrower, Eric. He man I had shared a bed with for 5 years. The man I thought I knew inside and out. Why would he need a $9,800 loan? We weren't rich by any means, but we lived comfortably. We split rent, groceries, and bills. He had a stable job. I did freelance copywriting. We weren't buying yachts, but we weren't struggling either. Or so I thought. Million questions flooded my brain, but one instinct took over: I need to know more. Unlocked the iPad. He'd never changed the passcode, 0627, his birthday. Classic. Started digging. First, I searched his email for the word loan. And that's when the floor really gave out beneath me. Our loan confirmations. 4. From 4 different lenders, dating back 14 months. All similar amounts, between $5,000 and $12,000. All to him. All recent. Where was this money going? I didn't see any new car. No surprise vacations. No expensive electronics lying around. Then, like an idiot, I thought, maybe he's planning to propose. Maybe the money was for a ring, or some grand gesture. Maybe I just ruined the surprise of a lifetime. Deep down, something in me already knew that wasn't it. That's when I checked his texts. Didn't even need to look far. Right near the top of his messages was a thread labeled just one letter, M, and what I found in there destroyed me. It was like reading a conversation from an alternate reality. One where my boyfriend wasn't in Denver, wasn't coming home to me, wasn't dreaming of our future together. Instead, he was texting someone else about. Lily needs a new backpack for school. She asked where Daddy was tonight. Rent is due on the 15th, can you cover this month too? Rent? Rent for what? We live together, this is our apartment. What other rent? There were even photos. A little girl with brown hair and big curious eyes, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Drawing a picture of a man holding a briefcase. The word Daddy written in shaky crayon letters. And Eric, he was smiling in one of the pictures. Arm around the girl. Holding what looked like a pink backpack in his other hand. Stared at the screen for so long my eyes blurred. My fingers went cold. My chest felt hollow, like something had been ripped out of it. Didn't even cry. Not at first. Just sat there in silence as the reality settled in like a fog creeping under a door. He wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just hiding debt. He had a whole other life. Child. A separate household. Another woman. Maybe even love, real or fake, I didn't know. I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't his one and only. Was his second. And the saddest part, if that notification hadn't popped up, If he had remembered to turn off iCloud sync, or taken the iPad with him, I might have spent another 5 years loving a ghost. Instead, I was alone in our living room, cat curled at my feet, watching my life split in two. Oh, fireworks. No screaming match. Just quiet devastation, delivered one text at a time. And this was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even lie down. I just sat there on the couch, surrounded by silence, the iPad still glowing on the coffee table, the pictures of the little girl burning into my brain. Didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even speak. You'd think finding out your boyfriend of 5 years had a secret child would cause a complete emotional breakdown. But no. I felt like my emotions had curled up and gone into hibernation. All I could feel was cold logic taking over. If I wanted answers, I'd need to find them myself. So I did. By sunrise, I'd pulled up every account he had saved on that iPad. He'd never logged out of anything. Gmail, Venmo, calendar, even a couple of rental apps. Like a trail of digital breadcrumbs left for someone who was never supposed to look. The most important clue came from the loan confirmation email. In the PDF contract was an address. Not ours. Copied it, pasted it into Google Maps, and there it was, a modest, 2-bedroom rental house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. A red front door. A tiny swing set in the yard. An American flag hanging on a crooked pole. Zoomed in on the street view. And my breath caught in my throat. T was the swing set. The one I saw in the background of one of the photos with Lily. Suddenly, this wasn't just messages and numbers on a screen. His was real. His man I had built a life with, this man who kissed me goodnight and told me I was his everything, was playing house somewhere else, with someone else. With a child. A family. A second goddamn life. ND, I needed to see it with my own eyes. That afternoon, I got in my car and drove. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just put the address into the GPS and followed the robotic voice out of the city, through winding streets, into neighborhoods I'd never been in. The closer I got, the more detached I felt, like I was floating outside my own body. Like I was watching a documentary about someone else's life unraveling. T 4:08 p.m., I turned the corner. His red door came into view. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Parked across the street, kept the engine running, and waited. And at 4:12 p.m., the front door opened. First came the little girl, Lily. Same dark hair. Same wrinkled nose. She was wearing a purple backpack and skipping down the steps like she had not a care in the world. Then came a woman. Mid-30s, maybe. Long black hair. Worn jeans, soft face, tired eyes. She looked like someone who used to laugh a lot but hadn't in a while. He gently took Lily's hand and walked her to the end of the driveway. And then a car pulled up. Rick's car. Felt my body seize. It was unmistakable, silver Toyota, the one I had ridden hundreds of times. He got out, holding a grocery bag in each arm, dressed in the same business casual style he always wore on work trips. Rolled up sleeves. That same smug, charming smile. Then he bent down to hug Lily. And I swear to God, I saw her hand him a drawing she had made at school. He looked at it, smiled, and told her something. I couldn't hear it, but I knew that smile. It was the same one he used when he gave me flowers, when he told me I was his world. Except it wasn't mine anymore. He was theirs. Sat there, engine still running, unable to move. This wasn't some fleeting affair. Some reckless mistake. This was routine. He knew him. The child knew him. The house knew him. He was comfortable there. Belonged there. While I was. What? The mistress? The fill-in girlfriend while he played house part-time. The tears came all at once, hot and silent. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just let the tears roll down my cheeks while I stared at this life I'd never been meant to see. They disappeared inside after a few minutes. The red door shut quietly behind them. Didn't get out of the car. I didn't confront him. I didn't even call. Instead, I just drove away. Every part of me wanted to hit the gas and never look back. But I couldn't stop watching the rearview mirror. That swing set. That door. That man. Back at the apartment, I walked in like a zombie. The cat meowed at me. I didn't pet her. Sat down in my living room and looked around. The blanket he always used. The ugly lamp he insisted we keep. The photo of us at his cousin's wedding, me in a green dress, him beaming like the luckiest man alive. It was all lies. Every inch of it. And for the first time since I saw that email, I finally understood the full weight of what had happened. He wasn't cheating on me. He was living a parallel life. And I wasn't part of the story. Was the side note. The B-plot. The girl who didn't know. But not anymore. Now I know everything. And that meant the game was about to change. I spent the rest of that weekend in a fog. Not the kind where you drift aimlessly. No, this was colder. Sharper. A kind of numbness with edges. Every time I glanced at a photo of us on the fridge, or the sweatshirt he left on the couch, it felt like a quiet little slap across the face. How many things in this apartment had he touched with hands that held a second life? When Eric walked through the door Sunday night, carrying overpriced takeout and humming like a man with nothing to hide, I nearly choked on the bitterness rising in my throat. "Babe," he smiled, "you wouldn't believe the drama at this conference." I blinked. "Oh yeah?" He leaned in, kissed me like nothing was wrong, and plopped down onto the couch as if he didn't have a child who had drawn him pictures just 3 days earlier. Wanted to scream at him. Grab the nearest wine glass and hurl it at the wall. Demand answers. Ask him what kind of person could lie for years with such effortless calm. But I didn't. Because I realized something, he's good at lying. I need to be better. So I smiled. Red-ended I missed him. Asked about the conference. Let him ramble about keynote speakers and free hotel breakfasts. I nodded, laughed at his fake stories, and told him how much I loved having him home. Because now? I was no longer in mourning. Was preparing for war. That night, when he went to bed early, claimed he was exhausted, I waited. Then I got to work. While he slept, snoring lightly beside me like a man without a single burden, I lay awake cataloging every moment from the past year. Every missed birthday dinner. Every unexplained weekend. Every business trip that suddenly had a fog of suspicion around it. Created a spreadsheet. Atesh. Times. Loan amounts. Bank transfers. Venmo records. His iPad was a goldmine, and he had no idea I knew the passcodes to his email, his cloud, even his Slack messages. Became a ghost in his digital shadow. Found a document buried in his Google Drive, a scanned birth certificate. Eilis. Date of birth? 5 years ago. Place of birth? Same city. Father listed? Eric Michael Sanders. Stared at that certificate for a long time. My fingers hovering over the screen. The final nail in the coffin. It wasn't just an affair. It was a family. He didn't accidentally get someone pregnant. He stayed. He funded them. He lied to both of us, and kept us carefully separated like 2 lives stacked in parallel universes. But now those universes were going to collide. I had a choice. Could leave. Pack my things, vanish, maybe leave a note with all the evidence taped to the fridge like some cinematic mic drop. But that's not how this ends. This doesn't end with me quietly walking away while he keeps manipulating everyone in his path. Oh, his ends with him being seen. So I started planning. 2 days later, I told him I wanted to do something special for our anniversary. We didn't have an official date, but every year around mid-April, we'd do something low-key, pizza, cheap wine, maybe a museum or a weekend drive. But this year, I said, I wanted to celebrate right. A surprise dinner, I told him. Just dress up and meet me there. It's going to be meaningful. He looked at me with that smug little smile, the one I used to adore. You sure you're not proposing to me? He joked. Laughed. Don't tempt me. He had no idea. What I didn't tell him was that I had already contacted 2 people. His parents. And her name was Michelle, I'd later learn, wasn't what I expected. When I first reached out, via a polite, calm email, she ignored me. I followed up with a simple message, "Hi. I'm not trying to hurt you. But if you're Lily's mom, and Eric is who I think he is, I believe you deserve the truth. And I can prove it." Still, no response. So I sent one photo. Out of me and Eric. Not of the apartment. Out of us in bed, him sleeping, my hand on his chest, a timestamp visible in the corner. Taken 2 weeks ago. He replied within 30 minutes. Where and when? I told her the date and the restaurant. He didn't hesitate. I'll be there. Everything was in motion now. Booked a private dining room at the first place Eric ever said I love you. He wouldn't remember that. Men like him rarely do. But I remembered everything. Planned every detail with ruthless precision. Long rectangular table. Name cards. Candles. His parents on one side. Michelle and Lily on the other. And me at the head. Because for once in this relationship, I would be in control. Rick? He would be walking straight into the reckoning he'd spent 5 years avoiding. And the best part, he'd never see it coming. I remember every second of that night with surreal clarity. The way the restaurant hostess smiled at me as if I was just another woman planning a romantic dinner. The way my heels clicked against the tiled floor as I walked into the private dining room. The sound of my heartbeat, steady, focused, loud. The table was already set, just the way I'd asked. White linen runner. Flickering candles. A subtle centerpiece, neutral, elegant. I'd chosen a round table so no one could hide. So we could all look each other in the eye. So he would have nowhere to run. At 6:47 p.m. Michelle arrived. He came alone. No Lily. Her dark hair was pulled back, face calm but unreadable. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Just jeans, a dark sweater, and that look a woman gets when she's already had the worst thing happen to her, and now she's simply bracing for the fallout. We nodded at each other without speaking. There was no need for pleasantries. We weren't friends. We weren't rivals. We were soldiers on the same battlefield, just in different trenches. At 6:58 p.m. Eric's parents arrived. His mom looked thrilled, she assumed this was some anniversary dinner surprise, probably thought a proposal was coming. His dad looked less enthusiastic, but polite. They hugged me like I was still part of their future. Didn't hug back. Was too focused on the clock. Because at 7:02 p.m. Eric walked in. Wearing his navy suit. Smiling like a man stepping into a celebration thrown just for him. Until he saw the table. Until he saw Michelle. Until he saw the faces around the room that didn't match the story he'd been telling. He stopped mid-step. Blinked. Looked at me. What is this? I smiled. A dinner. You like surprises, right? He looked between Michelle and me like someone trying to solve a math problem where the numbers kept changing. Michelle, what are you doing here? His voice cracked slightly. Oh, she said coolly. Just having dinner with my daughter's father. Eric's mother turned sharply. Daughter? Michelle pulled out a printed photo of Lily and placed it gently in front of him. Meet Lily. Your granddaughter. His mom's hand flew to her mouth. His dad's face went still. Pale. Rick stumbled back a step. Katie, what the hell is this? I stood and calmly pulled a folder from my bag. Laced it on the table. Penned it to reveal the first page, Eric Michael Sanders, a 5-year timeline of deception. He laughed, nervously, falsely. You've got to be kidding me. I didn't blink. You always said I had a talent for storytelling. So I wrote one. It's nonfiction. What followed wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't shouting, or chaos, or broken plates. It was a presentation. Laid it all out, calm, measured, impossible to argue. He loans. The duplicate rent payments. The texts, the birth certificate, the photos. The calendars that overlapped in impossible ways. Michelle backed me up with her own receipts. Screenshots. Emails. He said he was with me when he was actually playing daddy at school functions. Rick sat in stunned silence. His mother cried quietly, clutching the photo of Lily. His father stared at the table, jaw clenched, hands folded like a man trying not to punch his own son. And me, I was steady. Didn't cry. I didn't yell. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. This was surgical. A clean cut to remove the rot. When I was finished, I placed one final envelope in front of Eric. He looked at it like it might explode. It's not a subpoena, I said. It's a letter. He didn't move. So I opened it for him and read it aloud. Eric. You told me I was your partner. Your future. The woman you couldn't imagine your life without. Turns out, you imagined several lives, just fine. You don't get to have both. So I'm leaving you with what you actually deserve, nothing. No second chance. No drama. No mess. Just the truth. Live in it. Drown in it. I'm free. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and pushed it toward him. Rick opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Michelle stood. Without a word, she walked to me, took my hand, gave it a quick squeeze. Then she left. His parents followed, saying nothing. His mom didn't look back. Finally, I turned to him. He looked smaller now. Not just in body, but in presence. In dignity. In lies that no longer held weight. This, I said softly, was the last time you'd get to sit at a table where people thought you were a good man. Then I walked away. There's a strange quiet that comes after a storm, not the peaceful kind you long for on lazy summer evenings, but the kind that feels heavy and hollow, as if something massive has passed through and stripped everything bare, leaving behind a silence so complete that it rings in your ears. That's the kind of quiet I woke up to the morning after the dinner. The apartment felt different, not because the furniture had changed or the sunlight looked any duller through the windows, but because every object now carried the weight of something that no longer existed, us. The coffee mugs we used to share lazy mornings with, the throw blanket we fought over on movie nights, even the dent in the floorboard where he once dropped a wine bottle, everything had been a part of a performance I didn't realize I was acting in until the curtain finally fell. He didn't call. OT that day, or the one after. Imagine there's a version of him that wanted to reach out, that maybe even rehearsed the apology, stood in front of a mirror trying to conjure tears that might soften the monstrousness of what he'd done. But the truth is, when you strip away the illusion, people like Eric don't know how to face reality, only how to manipulate it, and when the audience walks out, they have no lines left to speak. Instead, I got a single email. Oh, subject line. UST 3 sentences, you blindsided me. That was cruel. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them needed to be wasted on a man who spent 5 years feeding me breadcrumbs while dining at 2 tables. He doesn't get the privilege of my closure. His parents called a week later. His mother, tearful and cracked, told me that she was ashamed of him, of what he'd done, and of how little they had actually known about the man they raised. She said Lily was beautiful. Said she couldn't stop thinking about that photo. I could hear her voice breaking like something brittle that had been held together by years of willful blindness, finally giving in to the truth. His father, in a quieter call the next day, apologized for not being more present throughout our relationship. He said he always assumed Eric was a good man, responsible, driven, stable. Told him the truth, he was all those things. Just not to me. Not to Michelle. Not to Lily. He was only ever responsible when it suited him, driven when it benefited him, stable when no one pulled back the curtain and saw what he was really building behind the scenes. They understood. They didn't ask me to forgive him. They only said thank you for opening their eyes before it was too late. Michelle and I exchanged a few emails after the dinner. Nothing long. Nothing dramatic. Two women who had once believed in the same man, quietly acknowledging the wreckage he left behind and the strange, reluctant bond that now tied us together. She told me that Lily had started asking fewer questions about why Daddy stopped coming by, and more questions about her drawings, her school friends, her own little world, which, in the end, was what mattered most. He said she wasn't sure she'd ever let Eric fully back into their lives. Didn't tell her what I hoped. But it was this: don't. I moved out of the apartment the following month. It wasn't dramatic. There were no final stares at the doorway, no lingering glances at our old bed. I packed my things, donated what I didn't want, and left the keys in the mailbox with a note for the landlord that said, simply, "Unit cleared. Thank you." I moved into a small studio in the quiet part of town. Not glamorous, not Instagram-worthy, but mine. Fully mine. No shared passwords. No dual toothbrushes. No secrets taped behind picture frames. Bought new furniture, second-hand, mismatched, imperfect. It made me feel human again. Started therapy. Told the full story out loud for the first time, watched my therapist's eyebrows rise and her mouth form a perfect little circle of disbelief. She didn't pity me. I appreciated that. She just listened, nodded, and said something I now repeat to myself in the mirror when I feel that old grief creeping back: what happened to you isn't your fault. But what you do with it. That's where the healing lies. One night, a few weeks after the move, I took a walk to clear my head. Ended up at a park I didn't know existed, tucked between two streets with trees that arched like cathedrals. I sat on a weathered bench and looked up at the sky, letting the cold night air sink into my skin. And then, for the first time in months, I exhaled. Just a breath, but a full, aching release of everything I had been holding: the betrayal, the humiliation, the gnawing self-doubt, the fear that maybe I was broken in some way that attracted liars like moths to a flame. Wasn't. Was just a woman who loved too deeply. And now I was learning how to love herself with the same intensity. They say closure is overrated. I used to believe that, especially when I thought I wouldn't get any. But now, I understand, closure doesn't come from the liar admitting what they did. It doesn't come from the dramatic apology or the tearful reunion or the neat little bow at the end of a conversation. Closure is the moment you decide that their story no longer deserves to be the loudest one in your head. And for me, that moment came quietly, at dusk, on a forgotten bench in a park that felt like it had been waiting for me. Am not angry anymore, am not even sad. Am just free. And I'll never again settle for being someone's second home.